passed the necessary threshold. And so again, thank you everyone for being here for our Placer AI webinar, Shopping Center Myths and Facts. This has become now an annual tradition. This is one of the webinars I look forward to the most, and primarily I look forward to it because of our amazing guests for the third year running. No small feat. Thank you so much, David Spawn, Vice President of Research at Brixmor, and Alana Loeffler, Managing Director, Business Strategy, Americas Retail Services at Cushman & Wakefield. David and Alana, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to join you again, Ethan.
This is the big one for me. This is the one I get excited for. This is my prep up into Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Again, super brief for those of you who are not familiar with Placer, who are new to us. What is the data that informs at least our perspective on the world? We observe a panel of tens of millions of devices. Very critically, this is all de-identified aggregate data. So we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. We then analyze that data with machine learning and AI algorithms to make estimations on visits to retail locations across the country. And then we present that in a wealth of different reports within our platform on everything from visits, true trade areas, the customer journey, psychographics and demographics, and a whole lot more. But enough about Placer, and now on to the myths and facts, the reason we are here. And so let's start with maybe one of the key trends of this last year, and kind of a big question that we get asked quite a bit of what the impact will be moving forward. And David, I will start with you here. The pursuit of value will still be a primary driver for consumers in 2024, on par with its role in 2023. Myth or fact?
Well, that's a fact. I mean, I will introduce you to my new friend, the Federal Student Loan Repayment Program. I think consumers have a lot to think about in terms of where they spend their money, and I don't think it's any surprise that value will continue its strength that it has in 23. I think what's interesting is that you're seeing it across the board, including other categories in grocery. I mean, let's take a look at grocery outlet bargain market. I mean, they really struggled during the pandemic to keep the comps up as other grocers were just flying. I mean, racing into the stratosphere. They've now sort of turned that paradigm on its head and are soaring when other grocers are really sort of coming back down to more reasonable levels. You'll also see that with all the acquisition of Southeast Grocers. I mean, clearly off-price grocers are also experiencing a moment, as you will. And I think this will just continue.
Alana, same question for you. Do you think value is going to have the same impact in 2024 as it did in 2023?
Yeah, I would go with fact as well. And if you look at more traditional value companies like Dollar General, Family Dollar, the Dollar Tree, they netted around 1,100 new stores this past year, which accounts for about a third of gross retail store openings in 23. So, we saw that demand strong. We see where, consumers might be headed for 2024. If there's an increase in credit card debt, or if the labor market starts to become a little shaky, that value and private label products focus is really going to be in a higher demand next year.
Great point. By the way, and apologies for not mentioning this, if anyone has a question at any point throughout the conversation today, please plug it into the Q&A button situated at either the top or bottom of your screen, depending on how you have Zoom configured. We'll try to get to them throughout the course of the conversation when they pop in, or at the very worst, towards the end. Okay, this one is I think this is a little bit of a spicier one. Beauty has been one of the big segments, and the segment has been so strong that we should expect a pull forward moment. And by that, I mean such success that it can't possibly maintain the success, and that the segment will not perform as well in 2024 as it has in recent years. Alana, I'll start with you. Myth or fact?
I would say that is a myth. I mean, the beauty sector is one of my most favorite sectors lately. There's just been so much innovation going on, so much growth. And, we saw Sephora, Ulta have incredible performance. We've seen the rise of beauty within the luxury sector. So brands like Chanel creating a standalone experience, Prada relaunched their beauty offerings from, I think they had initially done it about 10 or 15 years ago, and they went through a relaunch recently. And Dior Baby just came out with this like $360 fragrance for babies to like enter the world smelling magical. So, we're seeing it in the baby space. And then there's also, Kohl's saying they're going to expand to include more Sephora's, and Target's are now including Ulta within their stores. So I think the shopping experience is evolving there. We're seeing so many exciting innovations, and I think that that's just here to stay, and we're going to see that keep moving forward in 24.
Isn't it crazy? Because isn't that the best part of babies, that they already smell like wonderful?
Absolutely.
I want it to smell like baby. But okay, this is the weird tangent. Same question for you, David. Myth or fact, beauty is going to struggle to keep up to the levels it's hit in previous years?
Yeah, I'm gonna hold on the question. I think I definitely understand that it feels like there's a lot of forward momentum within the category, but I also have a lot of respect for Simeon Siegel, who I remember trumpeting the pull forward sort of mindset, if you will. But that being said, I think what it's tempered by is sort of, if you're going to start seeing tightening and spending in certain cases, there could be sort of a message that, beauty sort of flies in the face of. But that being said, I think for many people, they see it as an affordable luxury. And, a shout out to the worst word mashup ever from the late 80s, early 90s, the mastige moment. I think people may see that as a chance to sort of trade up for something and, spend down somewhere else, if you will. That I really think there is that element. And, look, I mean, you go out, everybody's going out again, and they have been for a while. It's not new, but I think that just continues beauty's forward strength. So I'm not entirely certain it's going to keep the levels it did in 23, but it's still definitely a strong moment.
I think that affordable luxury point is super important. And this idea of like the visit in beauty is more meaningful. Like there is a bigger reason to do it. And once you're in the store, I just think it's hard to bet. Like there's certain segments or retailers you just learn over time that it's a good idea not to bet against. And I think this is the segment du jour at the moment for that. Here's one that I really like. And David, we'll start with you here. It's time to talk about office. And I think we have seen this kind of reality where 3 days a week, this kind of 60 to 70% visit recovery overall seems to be the standard right now. Myth or fact, this is the new normal in office for the foreseeable future?
I don't see how it's not. I mean, if anyone on the call has not been to an office score lately, then you need to go visit one. But that being said, I really feel like I'm really a lot less concerned about coastal gateway markets, New York and San Francisco and probably Miami and a few others. It seems like everyone is back, and it's sort of like, but now it's like either it's Monday to Wednesday, or it's Monday and Tuesday, or it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I think there's a lot of variety there, but I do feel like this is where it's going to go, and the retailers who are supported by that office population, that's going to be the new normal as well. I just don't see that. I do think the one place where I'm sort of not disagreeing with the new normal, but I think it's more concerning are those smaller markets, the secondary markets where there's just less compelling reason for anyone to be back in the office overall. It doesn't have the additional incentive of being able to do something afterwards, and you still see a lot of, vacant, retail storefronts there.
That's a great point. Alana, same question for you. Myth or fact, this is the new normal?
Yeah, I would agree. I think we are in the new normal. We haven't really seen those numbers change in quite some time. And, everybody loves this hybrid work model. They love being able to work from home a few days a week, go into the office a few days a week, make sure that they've got that work-life balance or whatever that means to them accounted for. And, I think what David mentioned about we're seeing, strength Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in a lot of the urban environments. But, then if you think about the job market, if it starts to get a little tougher, we could see employees start to go back into the office. Maybe, the beginning of the week gets a little stronger. They might want to have more visibility being in the office if the job market starts to tighten a bit. So that could improve a little bit more traffic. It could make it a little bit more stronger, and maybe even out that the weekly average. But overall, I think we've landed in the new normal.
I think, yeah, go ahead, David.
Oh, sorry. One other thing that, sort of piggybacking off of what Alana said, I think a lot of it really has to depend on what the job market looks like in the next, 12 to 18 months, because, if I'm Jamie Dimon sitting on top of an office tower that's going up in East Midtown, it's like, oh, that's a little, concerning. But, if it gets tighter, it's a little easier the stick becomes a little bit more of a compelling reason to go back to the office.
I mean, it's a really good point. I kind of sided with that perspective, but maybe this is a year and change ago. I forget who had said it. It was a big player in the office space who were like, now that the job market's getting a little bit worse, you'll see that kind of comeback. But I just don't see why it benefits the employer to not give that benefit. Right. It is something so easy and it's sticky for the employee, because it's like, well, do I want to leave because I do have this flexible work environment? And I think it's a difficult thing to pull back. A comment came in. It'd be interesting to look at kind of easy entry buildings versus tough entry buildings. And I think it brings up a really important point that I think there's this, we're going to talk about this too in the retail side, but there's a placemaking element to office buildings that I don't think existed before. It kind of touches on your point, David, of, think about areas that have a lot going on around it. It is going to become a big question for office owners of why do people want to come to this place? And it can't just be the stick of my boss is making me. There must be a compelling reason. I think we're all touching on that. Yeah. And it's it's a really kind of important, if you're trying to look for how this sector is probably going to evolve, I think that will be a guiding principle.
Yeah. A shout out to a peer of mine is the person who came up with the phrase that, office is the new retail. Like they're going through fundamentally many of the issues that retail has had, dealt with over the last 5 to 7 years, and there has to be a wholesale rethinking of what the office means to people.
I agree with that point. And I think what almost like this subtext there that's so important is the retail exaggeration that was the retail apocalypse narrative now feels like it's the office apocalypse narrative. And it's too simplistic of a view for something that robust, that significant, that's central to our lives, that you're more likely to find some evolved version with winners and losers, obviously, than some wholesale 180-degree shift. Okay, Alana, let's start with you. This is one of my favorite topics of the entire year. I think it's fascinating. I'm so excited by it. Myth or fact, movie theaters are back.
This is an interesting topic. I want to go with fact, but I have to say also that this is a complicated sector. I think, there were a few great movies this year that came out: Barbie, Oppenheimer, the Taylor Swift effect. I think it really reminded us of how much we love the theater experience. Everybody got dressed up. They put on their friendship bracelets. They went out with their friends to go see the Taylor Swift movie. But I think it's also complicated. There's been this consolidation going on since the pandemic. A lot of theaters have needed to renovate or need to renovate to bring in that elevated theater experience that everybody really wants now. They want to be able to have that food and beverage component. They want more comfortable seating. And they need to get that capital somewhere. And that's usually from these blockbusters coming in. And we've now seen the writers' strike, the actors' strike, and there's going to be that gap in kind of content, I think, for maybe the first portion of next year that we are going to see. And so I think that might be a little bit of a sticky time for theaters, but I think, I think people want to be back in the theater. It also drives traffic, duration. It drives, for the rest of the shopping centers that it's among. But I also think there's another side of it, which is these movies are coming out. There's also these incredible streaming services that want to take advantage and showcase these movies. So I think we might see more in the way of these deals being done between the major theaters and the movies, so that there is a certain amount of time that there will be shown in the theater before they're then able to become available on streaming. Because, you know, the theaters have to have that draw and they don't want to be showcasing something that you can just get at home. So I think there's going to be that exclusivity component that will also start to continue to drive traffic to theaters. So, you know, like I said, it's complicated right now, but I think that it's a really exciting time for theaters, and we'll continue to see traffic strong.
Great point. David, same question to you, myth or fact? Movie theaters are back.
I'm a little less optimistic about this. And, you know, I just feel like, so, I mean, what we're seeing in theaters now was all content that had created, you know, even a year ago. So I think we have a long runway of content that's been produced, and they've been waiting. They're now excited because they actually have actors can actually go out and promote it, which is, you know, was a missing piece for 4 months. So I do think that it's really, I'm going to say it's a little later to me. It's probably second quarter next year when we really start to see the effect of sort of the lack of anything new that was written in, you know, 5 months of 2023 that good is going to be able to be pushed out. You know, the quality will suffer. I frankly, as a fan of film, I can't imagine that the quality could get any worse than it you know, has across much of what's in the movie plexes. But I do also think that the concern I have is there is a large portion of the movie going public who has never returned to the theater since the pandemic, you know, and folks who really are looking for a more of a like a high quality product have really struggled, you know. I mean, unless they succumb to, you know, the sort of the well-oiled publicity machine of the Barbieheimer, you know, effect. I'm not sure that there's that component can come back, and the expense of retrofitting those theaters is going to make it a really tough sell. I think there's really I think it's going to be, the flight to quality has already occurred. Clearly, as Alana has pointed out, and I think that it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I really think we're going to see it maybe later in the year next year when we'll really see how long it holds up, and it's going to be a difficult comparison to this July next year.
Yeah,
I very disappointingly agree with both of you. There is a content problem, and it's not just the writer's strike. It's Barbie was unique. Oppenheimer was unique. Like, on all the credit to these theaters driving and the campaigns and the marketing that went into driving that engagement, you can't just be centered around major blockbusters.
No,
because there are going to be some that swing and miss. And I just think there's you know, we talked about the reimagining the office. We've talked about this extensively about theaters. We need to ask what content belongs in a theater, because there's a lot of movies that don't belong in that experience. But there's a lot of other types of content that probably does. But it's going to be challenging to make that adjustment, that shift, and explain to consumers why that shift makes sense.
right. I mean, it reminds me, I don't know if either of you saw what was the series on Netflix, it's about the two friends, Rose Byrne and Seth Rogen.
Yes.
In LA, and her family like has a movie night and they can't decide on anything, so they all end up like, each of the kid gets their headphones and their iPad and they watch their own thing. I mean, you know, that's I think where a lot of folks have gone, and I mean, how do you wrench them back out? I mean, I agree that there's a lot of stuff out there that shouldn't be. I mean, look at how that Marvel, the most recent release, is done. I mean, it's, you know, people want something different that they're not getting.
I mean, I fundamentally agree with you. I want to get to a question that came in. One of them we're going to get to very, very shortly, I promise. And the other one is touching on a topic that I have very little insight into, so I'm throwing this to the two of you. Has the proliferation of theft and shrinkage changed the way retail will approach site selection for new store locations?
I think has it changed it? I don't think it's changed it. I think more I mean, it receives sort of I hesitate to say an unnecessary amount of media attention. I mean, it is hurting a lot of retailers across the board without a doubt. But I do think that like the closure element of the storyline has gotten away from folks. Like there are a number of high profile closures that have been written about in the media that really occurred because, not because of theft. Theft was there, it has gotten worse. But what really happened was they had incentives and tax abatements that went away. And, you know, suddenly what was a profitable store when you had a tax abatement is no longer profitable when you don't have the abatement, but you have heightened levels of store theft. And it's, you know, it's a huge issue from the perspective of organized retail crime. I mean, they just wipe out categories across multiple stores in a market at one time. That is crazy. And I don't think there's really any way for them to sort of figure out a different criteria. I mean, will they leave cities? You know, certainly certain outposts have closed, but I don't think it's the end of that. As an overall, they just have to figure out a different way. I mean, most retailers have a plan for figuring out how to compensate a store that has high issues of, you know, in-store theft, but it is top of mind for landlords as well as retailers.
Yeah. Alana, same question for you. Has it changed the way you view site selection?
You know, I would agree with David, but I do think as it relates to site selection, there'll always be that flight to quality, and, you know, the best spaces are always going to be snapped up. But I do think the way they look at space, the way they approach, you know, how they look at just the consumer journey within the space and on the floor. You know, I've had a conversation with retailers that say we don't want to be in double height malls because we have to make sure we have security at, you know, on 2 different levels. We have to make sure we've got brand ambassadors that are spaced out accordingly. Technology needs to be, you know, filtered throughout. So there's a lot more in terms of considerations for site selection and just the way that the space is laid out for the consumer that I think goes into it. And, you know, there's a lot that retailers are doing to mitigate that risk. And they are making sure that they have certain technologies in place, that certain products are available while certain products might be, you know, more expensive products might be behind glass or not within the reach of the consumer walking through the store, you know, having the right security measures in place. So there's a host of, you know, ways that brands are looking at kind of mitigating that risk. And I think site selection goes into it, but, you know, there's always going to be those spaces that brands are going to want regardless.
That's a really good point. And there's so many levels to this issue that I know for me, I don't understand at all. Even as you're talking through it, you're like, oh, you know, I never even thought about, oh, how it impacts the way I want stores because I need to double the security. So it's not just the theft cost, it's the additional costs I'm going to add in order to prevent, et cetera. It's really interesting. All right, the strong get stronger. Brands like Nike and Lululemon not only showed strength, they actually expanded their reach. This is one of my favorite data polls we did the whole year. Lululemon has expanded into men more. Nike has just made everyone convinced that they should buy Nike, which is incredible. There is nothing that will stop the continued strength of athletic wear and athleisure brands in 2024. Myth or fact? Alana, let's start with you.
Well, you know, I'm the eternal optimist, so I'll go with fact. You know, everyone's grown to love these comfortable, trendy athleisure clothes. Consumers have gotten so much used to spending in this category. And I think, you know, they're really branching out in terms of the product offerings. They're not just clothes to work out in anymore. It's really more about the lifestyle that these brands convey and are able to kind of offer up. They've got outerwear, sweaters, dresses, you know, so I think there's just so much happening within this space that are going to keep consumers coming back. But in terms of their strength, I think, you know, one thing we might see is these larger creditworthy brands, you know, faring a lot better next year than the smaller privately owned companies, digitally native brands. I think, you know, the increased cost in capital and how each are both able to finance their growth. I think we're definitely going to see kind of like the tale of two cities there, or the tale of two brands. So I think it'll be a lot harder for, you know, the smaller brands to continue growing or at least achieve the level of financing that they might need going into 24. But I do still think we're going to see strength in the sector overall.
David, same question for you. Myth or fact? Yeah, leisure.
I would say
pleasure,
fact. I
entertainment.
mean, Alana's sort of hit the nail on the head. Everyone is just sort of used to this. I mean, I was sort of thinking to myself, I was taking the subway on Sunday and I saw someone wearing very expensive sneakers, sweatpants, a cropped leather coat, and a not inexpensive purse. It's sort of like, at that point, like, nobody cares what, like your style is your style. And this has really been heightened by, what we've seen in the marketplace in terms of athleisure. It's also really, I mean, I think when you look at any kind of sort of fashion oriented retail, it's all clearly inspired by streetwear. As long as that's going to continue, it gets out onto social media. I don't think there's any other sort of area that's really going to have this level of continued growth. And it's, that only inspiration for fashion is really, a friend of mine has a saying, is like, this is a truth, like this, that's what it is. That's the inspiration. That's what people want to wear. That's what they're going to provide. Sort of, this is easy as that.
I mean, I
I feel
very
like
much agree.
I feel like you just described the new uniform. It used to be, a suit that you would see on the subway going to the office, and now it's this like streetwear attire.
I don't know if that look would work so well for me, but I'll try to craft talk about it. I think there's also something about there isn't a marketing element here that has been going on for years. And it was like the right situation came with real strength before, and it exploded, which is why you think it's something different than segments that you see a rise and fall, because the foundation is so strong, and, as opposed to other segments. All right, moving. This is, to be fair, and I'll provide a little context here, because placemaking is a concept that we hear about in our day-to-day at Placer, mostly with our civic audience. So economic development professionals who talk about the importance of their spaces. We did a webinar about malls with Colin Shaughnessy from URW, and he was talking intensely about placemaking. And it was a really interesting concept that we wanted to double down on. And his concept, and I know that it's one that I agree with, is that placemaking is the most important concept that should drive the way we develop a property. And it's essentially saying, how do we make this a space that you want to spend lots of time in? And as opposed to the most efficient retail trip, as opposed to the most convenience, it's all about creating that space where I want to spend lots of time in it and be there for an extended period. David, I'll start with you. Placemaking is the most important concept that should drive developing a property, myth or fact?
Clearly a fact. I would actually expand it to say it's sort of beyond developing any property. It's really any property, for any existing property, any developing property, not that there are frankly that many of those. I mean, you have to find that way that makes a connection with your customer. I mean, if you don't have that, just, it's sort of, I mean, you're not moving forward. You're actually moving backwards, because everybody else who knows what they're doing is making that connection, whether it's the design, whether it's the new tenants, whether they're pop-ups, whether it's events, any kind of combo thereof. I mean, and it has to be tailored to the marketplace. I mean, in some markets, it's back to school events. Maybe you're handing out, like a backpack giveaway over, in August, or you're doing a drive-in movie, or you're having, or you're having the community members come and do a mural on one of your properties. There's that level of engagement has to happen for the folks in this day and age to want to come to a center, and it sort of ties into, I think, one of your later questions about mixed use. It's sort of the same idea that's behind it.
Alana, same question to you. Myth or fact, placemaking is the most important concept when developing a center?
Oh, I definitely agree with David. It's certainly a fact. We've seen enclaves, neighborhoods, communities, and even major cities continue to reinvent themselves in recent years. And it really comes down to the ability to really hone in on the needs of the local community and understanding who the audience is. Is it the local residential audience? Are we bringing tourists in to the area? Who's the demographic? What's missing, what's already there, and then what's missing in terms of an experience? Where's the demand headed in? What are the latest traffic patterns within the district or destination? And really start to build out an experience that matches what meets that demand. And I was reading the Project for Public Spaces is a terrific organization, and they have a concept called the power of 10 plus, which is essentially this idea that places thrive when users have a range of reasons to be there, and activities that will draw them in. And it's a big range of activities so that you're meeting the needs of different demographics and individuals within the community. But it could be anything from taking a walk along a waterfront or sitting down on a bench next to a tree to, more obvious activities like dining with your family or going to a movie or seeing a concert with friends. And even picking up your dry cleaning. So, a wide range, but just kind of that idea that you need to always be offering up these 10 plus activities at any given time, that also encompass some sort of uniqueness to the area, that kind of pays homage to the community. If there's any historical aspects or characteristics to be brought into that experience. And then having this ongoing programming at the same time that kind of keep the consumer coming back. So, at the end of the day, we're really focusing on destinations that bring joy, that are kind of, playing back to that, the feeling of well-being, creating peace, and bringing pleasure. So, I thought that was something interesting that I've read lately on that.
I think it's a really important point. You touched on something that has come up multiple times when we have conversations about placemaking, and it's seating. How comfortable, how nice are the chairs? You grab that coffee, you grab food. Is it a place that you want to sit for kind of another 20, 30 minutes? And it's almost like that is the litmus test of, have we done the thing we're achieving, where there's a draw to, all right, I'll hang out here for a little bit. And I think if you kind of answer that test, that's almost the sign that you've accomplished this goal.
I do think, sorry if I could just jump in. I think Alana made a really good point, like, that sort of that idea of the, like, 10 things that, you can enjoy while you're there. Like, this location is no longer just competing against other, like, retail locations. I mean, it's sort of competing against the world, if you will. I mean, there's a whole variety of other places that person can go. And if you don't provide more of a reason for that person to go, that's the connection right there. Like, I mean, if you can get that all in one place, then it's, I hesitate to say it's table stakes, but it just sort of becomes that element where you have to offer that, because you're competing against, like, everything. Someone sitting at home watching a streaming, like eating popcorn on the couch, or somebody going to a concert, or there's a lot of other options that people have, and that's who you're competing against.
I think it's 100% correct, and it adds up to how much of this kind of laundry list of things I need to do can I get done in this place. And we did a innovation-oriented webinar with Mickey Papillon from Irvine, and he was saying that's why he loves EV charging. He's like, it's another excuse to visit my center. It's, I have to charge my car, and I can get this done, and it's that point you made, Alana, of like, how many ands can you add to this space? There's something really significant it does to a property and to the desire of the consumer to visit that property. All right, I want to make sure we get to questions, so we'll move through some of these, but this is one that I like because I thought we had all collectively as a world agreed that small format is as cool as it could possibly get. And then this colleague that I will not call out here just in case he doesn't want to be, was like, no, this is so silly. Why is everyone saying small format is like the cure-all? But so myth or fact, and Alana, we'll start with you. The shift to smaller formats or multi-formats for retailers is a critical step forward, and the trend will continue to pick up pace in 2024.
I think it's 1000% fact. I think you hit it on the head when you said multiple formats, because yes, we are seeing smaller, but I think it's really retailers' ability to take a look at their portfolio across the markets and across destinations, and understand really what the purpose of their store is. Opening stores is an expensive process. Retailers are dealing with so much in the way of material costs, lead times, labor costs, the increased cost of capital right now. And they need to be so much more thoughtful about what the purpose of their store is in a particular market. What is the experience they want their consumer to take away? What products should be made available? Is it more of a smaller scale showroom model where it's a very curated product offering, maybe targeting a certain segment of their core consumer? Is it a big flagship with every product offering they have, and it's more about the experience of the brand and providing those great shopping moments with the consumer? So it's really understanding, because it kind of all comes down to the productivity per square foot, and understanding is this going to be a destination for everybody? Is it a destination that we are going to be targeting exclusively towards a particular demographic? And what does that productivity look like? And that's important for the landlords too, to be able to understand as they work with their tenants. So yeah, and we saw, brands that traditionally would occupy inline mall space, like Foot Lockers and Skechers, The Gap. They're moving towards open air shopping centers and taking smaller scale, taking smaller scale footprints. And then, vice versa, we look at big box and department stores like Macy's and Nordstrom's, and they've been pivoting towards smaller formats now. So a lot of innovation there. And I think as retailers are able to better pinpoint more information on their consumer, on the nuances of the local market, they're able to then really start to optimize their portfolios and make sure the purpose of their store is, accurately represented within the market.
That's a really important point in terms of why they do the multi-format and therefore the kind of the sustainability. David, same question for you. Myth or fact, the shift to small format or multi-format for retailers is going to continue and expand in 2024?
Yeah, I think absolutely it's a fact. I mean, it became evident, a number of years ago that, for retailers to get into specific locations, they had to change the size. They couldn't be the same one. But I do think to Alana's point, it's a variety of formats at work. I mean, just look at that, the acquisition of Aldi of the SEG stores. I mean, those stores are more than 2 times as large as the average Aldi. What is Aldi going to do? It's sort of it's a significant question for the open air world. Are they going to size up? Are they going to decrease the amount of private label? Are they going to sublease a portion of the space back out? Nobody knows, but it's their chance to do something different and do it in sort of a big, meaningful way. So I think it continues to showcase the need for retailers to sort of think differently about how they address demand in a marketplace.
And interesting, while we were having this, a comment came in that said, and yet Target is closing their smaller formats. And I think it almost makes the point for me, because I know when Target was opening those locations, we were talking about Target locations in the middle of New York City.
Right.
Our argument was, well, they want to be close to the New York City market has gotten older. There's all these millennials, they have a handful of kids, the Target appeal is more. If that audience shifts away, or if there's reasons to go, yeah, that store no longer makes sense. I think there's also an element of testing. So yeah, small format might not be the right approach for Target, but some other differentiation. I think about Target versus Super Target, right? We've seen those tests before. I mean, part of the idea is not everything's going to work, but you want to be trying things. We're running tight, so I want to get to one more question, but then I also want to get to this question that came in just now, which I really like. How are retailers incorporating direct/online sales into their locations? Alana, do you want to take this one? David, love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I think understanding e-commerce sales data within, different geographies across the US is really helpful in understanding what products are popular and resonating with certain consumers within different geographies. And, taking that sales information, taking the product information and being able to funnel that down to the store level is a great way to kind of keep that productivity per square foot up within a store and really be able to pinpoint what is selling within different geographies and different locations. And Of course, we also know about the reverse halo effect that happens when a store is opened in a certain market and how e-commerce sales are able to then rise up. They're so interconnected. And I think the more we start to see retailers being able to take that information and being able to take the sales data and bring that together to the physical realm. And, maybe it's even making sure that that location is able to support e-commerce sales, because there happens to be a lift in e-commerce sales within that geography. And so the store is better suited to be, have a larger back of house to be able to really support micro fulfillment. There's so much that's connected there that I think, retailers' ability to connect the dots and be able to analyze that data effectively will just increase their productivity for the business as a whole.
I mean, completely agree. David, anything to add to that, or?
No, I think that sort of summed it up perfectly. I mean, it is a fact when you have a location and your e-commerce sales are improved by the presence of that location. Also, the online shoppers also buying more in the store. I mean, it goes hand in hand, and the better those get integrated, the more, it ultimately, at the end of the day, the customer just doesn't care sort of how they get the product. They just want that. Like, so whether they're buying it online, whether they're buying it in the store, but they want all of the options above. So the better you can meet that as a retailer, the better you can expect to do it in the future.
It's a really important point. I actually almost feel like that needs to be recorded, cut, and reminded of hey, this is how these things work together and why there was the myth of the retail apocalypse to begin with. Let's kind of mold two things in together. So I want to know your expectations for the holidays, but I want to kind of fuse it in a question that came in of what category of retail properties do you think will perform best this season, whether it's indoor malls, lifestyle centers, etc. So, David, let's start with you. What are your holiday expectations? And let's try to weave that in with a narrative around kind of specific types of formats.
So I'm cautiously optimistic for the holidays. I am more concerned about the repayments and student loans, sort of seeing how that especially impacts millennials, folks who went ahead and bought houses while they were, sort of in a lull from a payment plan on a student loan. It's going to become a much trickier proposition. I mean, people have sort of learned how to juggle, how to trade up and trade down. That's been going on for years. But this sort of that repayment really introduces a whole new ball of wax when you've gone ahead and you now have a mortgage payment on top of it at a super inflated, super overheated price to begin with. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think there are people out there who are far better at this than I am, but I do feel that there is some optimism and it's sort of held up, but I'm a little cautious that it's going to last for that much longer. But in terms of sort of who's going to succeed, I'm going to just have to go with the hometown favorite and say, I think open air centers are going to continue to outperform. The sector as a whole has shown remarkable resiliency, especially in the fact that there's been no substantive supply built in the last 12 years. I mean, that's a really long time for that to have changed. And, rents continue to serve, upwards. And I think we're just going to continue to have strength within that overall sector of, open air, as, not that malls won't be able to harness some of that, but it's really, I think it's the open air center's time to shine.
That's a great point. Alana, same question to you. What are your expectations of the holiday season?
I agree wholeheartedly with David. I think it's going to be steady, but consumers do have a lot that they're dealing with. I think one thing that's unique to this year is that the holiday shopping season has been elongated. Consumers started shopping back in September, and we saw some big sales happening in October in order to really drag out the season, be able to spread that holiday budget over a longer period of time. So, that's something that I think that's unique. The NRF predicts that we're going to see an increase of 3 to 4%, which is, pretty steady in line to previous years. So I'm cautiously optimistic, and I think there's definitely going to be a drive towards great in-store experiences. I agree with the open air centers probably faring best. I do think the traditional Class A shopping malls are going to see steady or uptick in traffic. I think that people are just really going to be, if they're going to be shopping in store, if they're not going to be making their purchases online, there's got to be a reason for that. And they want to have, a fun day at the mall or at that open air center that they're going to, go into stores and check out new experiences. Really focusing in on personalization, promotions, loyalty programs, I think are going to continue to be strong this season. And I think we're going to see a lot more in the way of experiential gifts being given, since there has been that drive towards experiential. So I don't see that stopping anytime soon. But I think, generally speaking, we're poised for a strong season.
I mean, what better way to end than with some optimism? And with that, David, Alana, thank you both so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to doing this again next year, because three is good, but 4 is when we really start up.
Absolutely.
Thank you everyone for joining. If we are going to be doing a grocery-oriented webinar at the end of this month, and then we will cap off our webinar year with our annual Retail Trends webinar. So please join us for those. For those who we don't get to speak to beforehand, have a happy Thanksgiving. Have a wonderful rest of the month and a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you for joining. David and Alana, again, thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.